After years of hosting Thanksgiving, I was told this year I wasn't needed. My mother-in-law said my dishes were too sad and my house too small. My husband agreed. That evening, I cooked anyway, but this time, I cooked up something else entirely. I never thought I'd be one of those women who writes something like this. But here I am, sitting alone at my kitchen table in Spokane, Washington, almost a year after it all happened, and the anger still comes in waves. For 14 straight years, I hosted Thanksgiving in this house. This exact house that my mother-in-law later called too small for guests with any dignity. Every year I did the whole thing: turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce from scratch, 2 kinds of pie, even separate gravy boats for the vegetarians and the meat eaters. And I did it because I believed, truly believed it mattered. That feeding people was how I could prove I was good enough. That I could hold this family together where others had failed. And for the most part, nobody ever said anything bad. No one said thank you either, not really, but I didn't need applause. I just needed them to show up. And they did. Mark's side of the family, every year, without fail. His mom Audrey, his sister Kayla, his stepdad Ron, and usually some extra cousin or friend who didn't have anywhere else to go. I fed them all. Last November, 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, Mark told me, just offhand while we were drinking coffee in the kitchen, that his mother was thinking of hosting this year. He said it like he was reading the weather. She wants to try something different. Says she's got new ideas, new recipes. I blinked. You're joking. No, he said. I mean, don't take it personally. She just thinks maybe it's time to, switch things up. My stomach dropped. I asked, did she say something about the food? Mark hesitated, and right there I knew. She just thinks maybe your style is a little old school. Heavy. Like, not bad, just kinda sad. I couldn't speak. I physically couldn't get the words out. He kept talking, as if the pain wasn't settling in deep. Also, she mentioned it's a tight fit in here with everyone. You know how the kids have to eat in the garage sometimes. It's just not ideal. I wanted to scream. My husband, the man who had watched me pour myself into every detail of those holidays, was sitting there agreeing that my food was too sad and my home too tight. Later that night, I called Kayla, his sister. She's not exactly warm, but she's always been blunt. I asked her directly, did Audrey say anything to you about Thanksgiving? Kayla didn't even pause. Oh yeah, she's been planning this since last year. She said she's tired of casseroles and beige food. She wants a more modern table. Said your dinners felt like a funeral with mashed potatoes. Her words. I hung up and didn't speak to anyone for the rest of the night. Mark came to bed like nothing was wrong. That's what he does. He avoids conflict like it's radiation. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the hours I had spent trying to please these people. And none of it mattered. Thanksgiving Day came. Not one of them invited me. Mark left around noon, dressed in a sweater he hadn't worn in 2 years. He said, I'll be back early. Don't wait up. He kissed my cheek like I was some ailing aunt and walked out the door. I sat in my kitchen in silence for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just made a pot of coffee and stared at the fridge, still covered in old Thanksgiving Polaroids and grocery lists from years past. At 2:10 p.m., I opened my laptop and looked up someone I hadn't thought about in years. Mark's ex-wife's sister, Denise. She and I only met twice, at a birthday party and at the hospital when Mark's father died. But she once told me something that haunted me. She said, Mark's real good at pretending. Just make sure you know what's behind the curtain. Back then I didn't want to know. That day I did. I found her on Facebook. Sent a message. I just wrote, I think I'm finally ready to hear what you meant back then. If you're willing. She replied 20 minutes later. Where are you? I gave her my address. She showed up at 4:30 p.m., holding a bottle of wine and a manila envelope. And for the next 3 hours, I listened. Denise sat across from me at my kitchen table, the one that had seen 14 Thanksgivings. She looked older than I remembered, tired eyes, dry lips, but her voice was sharp as ever. I didn't know if I'd ever hear from you, she said. Honestly, I thought you'd swallowed the Kool-Aid like the rest of them. I told her I had. For a long time. She opened the manila envelope slowly, like she was waiting for me to change my mind. Inside were printouts, photos, and a flash drive. She pushed them toward me one by one. Let's start with the money, she said. I didn't even know there was money to start with. Mark and I had been on tight budgets for years. Our savings were thin, and he always made it sound like we were just scraping by because of my part-time job and the unpaid labor of family holidays. But Denise had proof that Mark had been quietly moving money into a private account, one I never knew existed. The deposits started 5 years ago, just small amounts at first, then bigger, especially after I started taking on more at home. Over $90,000 tucked away in some online bank. Where did this come from?
I asked. His mother, she said.
And her shell company. Audrey, it turned out, had been paying Mark under the table. For what? For helping her manipulate the family trust. For signing off on real estate flips. For pressuring Ron, her husband, into signing documents he probably didn't understand. And it wasn't just about money. Denise handed me a photo. It was of Mark and a woman I didn't recognize, taken outside a cabin I'd never seen. That was last spring, she said. That's Kara. She's Audrey's nutritionist. I blinked hard. Are you saying he's? Yes, she said. And Audrey knows. She arranged it. Mark told her he felt unseen at home. So she helped him feel seen. My hands shook. I stared at the photo. There was Mark, holding hands with this woman, looking relaxed in a way he hadn't looked with me in years. A cabin getaway. Probably paid for with money he told me didn't exist. So, why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked at me dead in the eye. Because I did nothing when he did this to my sister. And I still hate myself for it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I didn't even try. I waited for Mark to come home. He walked through the door at 11:15 p.m., smelling like cologne and wine. He looked at me, surprised to see me still awake. Hey, he said. You didn't wait up, did you? I said nothing, just stared. He gave that fake little laugh he always used when he knew I was mad. Come on, don't be like that. It's just one dinner. You'll host next year. I stood up and walked past him, into the bedroom. I didn't sleep. I lay there making lists in my head. Legal names, bank accounts, real estate titles, passwords I needed to find. The next morning, I called a lawyer. A woman named Judith. Asked for a consultation. Just to see what my options were. I also called Denise again. I told her I wanted copies of everything.
She said she'd already made them.
From that point on, I lived 2 lives. By day, I pretended nothing had changed. I still folded his laundry, cooked his meals, smiled at Audrey's Facebook posts like they didn't feel like a knife in my back. But behind closed doors, I was collecting emails, texts, bank records, conversations I recorded when Mark didn't know I'd left my phone on the table, voice memos about covering things up and making sure my name's off the books. I played dumb. I let them believe I was small and sad and finished. But I wasn't finished. Not even close. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, I got a call from the school district. I thought it was about a parent-teacher conference or maybe something with our son's attendance. But it wasn't. It was the HR department. Mrs. Alden, the woman said, we received a report alleging that you accessed sensitive student files without authorization. We're obligated to investigate. I froze.
What?
I haven't touched any student files in months. I barely work part-time. She said the complaint came in anonymously. But I knew who sent it.
Audrey.
This wasn't just about Thanksgiving. This was about clearing the board. Removing me entirely from Mark's life, from their family name, from the business. And now they were trying to ruin my reputation too. I went into the school the next day with my own file, emails, timestamps, proof I never accessed what they claimed. The investigation got dropped, but the damage was done. Teachers stopped talking to me. Parents avoided me at pickup. Even my own friends looked at me sideways, like maybe I was the problem. Mark didn't even pretend to be shocked. When I told him, all he said was, "That's crazy. I'm sure it'll blow over." And then he had the nerve to ask if I could still make his lunch for the week, since he was really slammed at work. I didn't answer. Instead, I drove to the courthouse. I wasn't filing yet, I was still laying tracks, but I wanted to understand everything I was entitled to. I spent hours talking to clerks, pulling public records, tracing land transfers and trust documents with Audrey's name all over them. Turns out, the family owned 3 properties I never knew about, rental homes that were bringing in steady income. Not one of them had Mark's name on them, but 2 had Audrey's maiden name, and the third? That one was listed under a shell corporation. The same name I'd seen in Denise's envelope. That same week, I ran into someone I hadn't seen in years. Ron's first son from a previous marriage,
Ethan.
He was quiet, kind, and had always kept his distance from the drama. We ran into each other at a gas station, of all places. He recognized me and asked how things were. I don't know what came over me, but I told him everything. Not the revenge part, just what had happened with Thanksgiving, the betrayal, the lies, the fake financial strain, the possible affair. He shook his head slowly. Audrey never changes. She did the same thing to my mom. Bled her dry. Used Dad's name to float loans, and then ghosted when it went south. Then he said something that changed everything. "You know she has a history of power of attorney abuse, right? She convinced my dad to sign over rights years ago, when he was on medication. We almost took her to court." Suddenly, everything clicked. Audrey wasn't just petty. She was strategic, cold, dangerous. And if she was doing it to Ron, she'd do it to anyone, including me. I started digging harder. Calling elder abuse hotlines. Consulting legal aid groups. I even tracked down one of Ron's old business partners, who confirmed that Audrey had isolated him from most of his longtime friends. Said she called them a bad influence and claimed they were trying to control his assets. It wasn't about Thanksgiving. It never was. That dinner was the beginning of the clean sweep. I was just the first loose end she wanted gone. So I decided to make myself very, very inconvenient to erase. I started wearing different clothes. Nothing dramatic, just sharper. Clean lines. Neutral colors. The kind of clothes that say, "I see everything, and I'm done playing nice." People noticed. Audrey noticed. She called one afternoon, acting sweet. "I wanted to check on you, dear. We haven't talked since the holiday, and I know that must have been hard." I didn't say much. Just listened. Let her fill the air with fake warmth. Then she slipped. "You know, sometimes change is good. It gives people space to grow. Mark's been thriving, hasn't he? So relaxed lately. I think this year's been good for him." That was her way of saying, "I took your husband. I gave him better." And that was the last call I took from her. The more I uncovered, the worse it got. Denise and I started meeting weekly. I gave her copies of everything I collected. She connected me to an old friend of hers, a retired forensic accountant. He took one look at the bank trail and said, "This isn't just sneaky. It's criminal." We worked in silence for weeks. Quiet moves. Public records. Carefully timed requests for account statements. I even created a fake Gmail and emailed Audrey pretending to be a local real estate investor. She responded within an hour, offering to loop in my son Mark for a possible off-market deal. Bingo. I saved everything. Printed it. Archived it. At home, Mark acted like nothing had changed. He still left his socks on the stairs. Still scrolled on his phone in bed, claiming it was work. Still kissed my cheek before walking out the door. The only difference now was I knew. I knew what he was. I knew what they were doing. But I also knew what they didn't. They didn't know about the binder I'd made, black, thick, tucked into the bottom drawer of my locked desk. They didn't know I'd opened my own account, moved small deposits weekly, prepaid for legal retainers, or pulled my name off anything joint that could be poisoned. They didn't know I'd reconnected with Ethan, and that he had agreed to testify about Ron's diminished capacity. They didn't know I had recorded my calls with Audrey. And they sure as hell didn't know what was coming. Then, one night, Mark came home with a bag of takeout. He set it down, kissed my forehead, and casually said, "Oh, by the way, Mom's thinking of turning the cabin into an Airbnb. Wanted to know if you'd help decorate it." I looked at him and asked, "Which cabin?" He blinked. "What do you mean? The one you took Kara to?" He froze. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just looked him in the eye and said, "I know everything. Every last thing." He tried to bluff.
Laughed.
Said, "You're being dramatic." So I walked over to the drawer, pulled out the binder, dropped it in front of him. He didn't touch it.
He didn't speak.
He just sat down slowly and said, "You've been planning this." And I said, "No,
You did.
when you chose them." Then I walked out of the room. I still hadn't pulled the trigger, but I was holding the gun. And they were all starting to realize I wasn't the sad, quiet hostess anymore. 3 days after Mark saw the binder, he moved into his mother's guest house. I didn't ask him to. I didn't throw a fit or make a scene. I just kept being calm. That scared him more than yelling ever could. He told people it was a break and that we were reassessing. What he didn't know was that I had already filed the paperwork. Quietly. No fault, but with every financial document attached. Denise helped me get it all notarized. The lawyer, Judith, filed an emergency motion for financial disclosure. We asked for full discovery, which meant all of Mark's secret accounts, every cent from Audrey, had to be shown. And they were. Turns out, Mark had been hiding more than the $90,000. There was nearly $160,000 filtered through what looked like consulting fees from Audrey's company. When I showed the court how those funds had been moved without my knowledge during our marriage, the judge didn't just freeze the accounts, he appointed a forensic auditor. That's when things got ugly. Audrey hired a lawyer. She tried to claim I was emotionally unstable, that I was trying to destroy the family legacy. She submitted a letter to the court painting me as controlling, frigid, and prone to emotional outbursts. But she made one big mistake. She didn't know I had her voice on tape. Remember that fake real estate email? I had the whole conversation recorded. Her saying she wanted to shuffle assets before things get messy, and her openly admitting that Ron isn't really all there anymore. I played that for the court, and I watched her face crack for the first time. Ron's kids, Ethan included, filed for full conservatorship. The court granted it within 48 hours. Audrey was removed from every account. She was forced to hand over every deed, every document, every key. That included the cabin, the one where she sent her son with another woman. She tried to appeal. She lost. Mark, meanwhile, was trying to backpedal. He sent me emails late at night. "Can we talk? Maybe we rushed into this. You're still my wife." I didn't respond. Instead, I filed a motion for spousal support, citing financial manipulation and marital misconduct. The judge sided with me. Mark was ordered to pay a fixed monthly amount, plus back pay for the funds he siphoned off. He lost access to the house, which was now solely in my name. And Kara? She was never more than a phase. Once the money dried up, so did her interest. She ghosted him a week after the judgment. That Christmas, I cooked again. Not for them. For myself, and a few close friends who stayed loyal through it all. I made everything from scratch: turkey, stuffing, sweet potatoes with real maple syrup. I served it on the same old plates Audrey once called cheap and tired. And it tasted better than it ever had. I'm not proud of every moment. I let things go too long. I let myself shrink to keep the peace. But I'm done shrinking. They called my food sad. They said my house was too small. Now I own that house outright. And Audrey? She's a guest in a home she no longer controls. Her name, once sharp and powerful, now whispered behind closed doors with pity and disgust. As for Mark, he's alone. No mother's approval, no second wife, no inheritance. Just quiet. The kind of quiet he gave me that Thanksgiving morning.
And now?
I finally like the sound of it.